Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it. The evening began like any other at La Belle Époque, the city's most opulent dining establishment. The restaurant was a sanctuary of luxury, where the elite gathered to indulge in fine cuisine and bask in the glow of crystal chandeliers. I, Oliver, was in my third year working as a waiter, and I had grown accustomed to the symphony of clinking glasses, soft murmurs, and the occasional burst of laughter that defined our evenings. I was just placing a plate of foie gras before a well-dressed couple when the front door creaked open. The gentle hum of conversation faltered as all eyes turned towards the entrance. There, framed by the grand doorway, stood an elderly woman. She looked 80 to 85 years old. Her appearance was a stark contrast to the polished opulence around her. She wore a threadbare coat, her shoes were scuffed, and her hair was a tangled mass of gray. Despite her disheveled state, there was an air of quiet dignity about her. She took a tentative step inside, and the whispers began. Who let her in? Someone muttered. This is hardly a place for the likes of her. Another voice chimed in, dripping with disdain. Is she lost? One man quipped. Must be a mistake. Another woman said, her voice dripping with condescension. I felt a pang of discomfort. It was clear she didn't belong here. At least not by the standards of La Belle Époque's usual clientele. But there was something in her eyes, a mix of defiance and vulnerability, that made me pause. Excuse me, I said to the couple, forcing a polite smile. I'll be right back with your wine. As I made my way toward the elderly woman, Jonathan, our manager, intercepted me. His face was a mask of controlled irritation. Oliver, what's going on here? He asked in a low voice. This isn't a shelter. I know, but look at her, I replied, glancing back at the woman. She doesn't seem like she's here to cause trouble. Jonathan sighed, rubbing his temples. Just see what she wants. If she's here to beg, she'll have to leave. We can't have her disturbing the guests. I nodded and approached the woman, who was now standing uncertainly near the coat check. Good evening, ma'am, I said gently. May I help you with something? She looked at me, her eyes piercing through the haze of age and hardship. I was hoping to get a bite to eat, she said softly. I have some money, just not much. I hesitated, aware of the eyes of the patrons boring into us. Let me see what I can do, I replied, offering a reassuring smile. Please, have a seat. I guided her to a small table near the back, away from the glaring stares. As she settled into the plush chair, I noticed her hands shaking slightly. I'll bring you something, I said before hurrying to the kitchen. The head chef, Marcel, was a stern man who valued perfection in every dish. As I explained the situation, his expression softened slightly. A simple meal, he said, nodding. Soup and bread. It's not on the menu, but it's warm and filling. Thank you, Marcel, I said, relieved. I returned to the dining room with a tray, feeling the tension in the air. As I placed the steaming bowl of soup and a plate of fresh bread before her, the woman looked up, her eyes glistening with gratitude. Thank you, young man, she said. You're very kind. It's no trouble at all, I replied. Please enjoy your meal. As she ate, I couldn't help but notice a ring on her finger, an ornate piece with a cluster of small diamonds. It looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I had seen it before. Shaking off the thought, I returned to my duties, though I found myself glancing back at her table frequently. The murmurs among the patrons had died down, replaced by a buzz of curiosity. Even Mr. Parker, one of our most distinguished regulars, seemed intrigued. He watched the woman with a thoughtful expression, his usual air of superiority tempered by genuine interest. The whispers had quieted down, but the tension in the restaurant was palpable. As I served the elderly woman her meal, I noticed the other diners casting furtive glances in her direction. Their curiosity seemed to outweigh their previous disdain, and a few even looked ashamed of their earlier reactions. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen her before, that there was something profoundly familiar about her. It wasn't just the ring, though that was certainly striking. It was the way she carried herself, the way her eyes seemed to hold secrets and stories untold. After serving her, I resumed my duties, but I couldn't focus. I found myself constantly looking back at her table. She ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were the finest delicacy she had ever tasted. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the spoon to her lips. I watched, fascinated by the juxtaposition of her delicate mannerisms and her ragged appearance. When she finished, I approached her table again. "How was your meal, ma'am?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It was wonderful, thank you," she replied, her voice soft but clear. There was a warmth in her eyes now, a faint smile playing on her lips. I haven't had food this good in a very long time. As I made my rounds, Jonathan caught my arm. "What's the story with her?" he asked, nodding towards the back of the room. "She just wanted a meal," I replied. "Marcel made her some soup." Jonathan frowned, but before he could respond, Mr. Parker stood up and approached us. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone carrying the weight of authority. "No problem, Mr. Parker," Jonathan said quickly. "We were just discussing." "Good," Mr. Parker interrupted, "because I intend to pay for her meal. In fact, I want her to have whatever she wants. Consider it my treat." Jonathan's eyes widened in surprise. "Of course, Mr. Parker. That's very generous of you." Mr. Parker nodded and returned to his table, leaving Jonathan and me standing there, stunned. "Well," Jonathan said after a moment, "I suppose that settles it." As the evening wore on, the initial shock of the woman's presence gave way to a strange sort of acceptance. The patrons seemed less interested in mocking her and more curious about her story. I continued to serve her, refilling her water glass and bringing her a slice of cake at Mr. Parker's request. "Thank you," she said again, her voice stronger now. "This is more kindness than I've seen in a long time." "May I ask your name?" I said, unable to contain my curiosity. "Eleanor," she replied, a faint smile on her lips. "My name is Eleanor." The name struck a chord deep within me, but I couldn't quite grasp why. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Eleanor," I said. "I'm Oliver." At a nearby table, an elegantly dressed elderly couple had been watching Eleanor intently. The woman, her silver hair perfectly styled, leaned closer to her husband, her eyes narrowing in scrutiny. "Isn't that—" she began, her voice trailing off. Her husband adjusted his glasses, squinting slightly as he studied Eleanor's face. "It can't be," he replied, his tone incredulous. "But it does look like her, doesn't it?" The woman nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm sure of it. That's Eleanor Ashford. She used to attend all the high society events. I remember seeing her at the charity gala years ago." Her husband's eyes widened in realization. Lady Ashford, the philanthropist. But what on earth happened to her? The revelation spread quickly among the diners, turning the atmosphere from one of mockery to stunned silence. Eleanor Ashford, the once renowned socialite and benefactor, now a shadow of her former self, had become the center of attention for an entirely different reason. As the whispers shifted to murmurs of disbelief and curiosity, I found myself even more intrigued by the story behind this woman. The patrons who had been so quick to judge now seemed unsure, their previous ridicule replaced by a mix of guilt and fascination. Anne approached me, her face pale with shock. "Oliver, did you hear what they're saying? That woman, she was once a lady of high society." "I heard," I replied, glancing back at Eleanor, who remained oblivious to the newfound recognition among the diners. "I think there's more to her story than we realize." With the entire restaurant now abuzz with this unexpected revelation, I knew that Eleanor Ashford's presence at La Belle Époque was more than just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of a story that would unravel in ways none of us could have anticipated. As the restaurant began to empty and the evening drew to a close, I found myself unable to shake the feeling that there was more to Eleanor than met the eye. She finished her meal and rose to leave, but not before catching my hand. "Thank you, Oliver," she said, her grip surprisingly strong. "You've been very kind. I won't forget this." "Neither will I," I replied, watching as she made her way to the door. As she disappeared into the night, I couldn't help but feel that our paths would cross again, and that when they did, the story would be far from over. The following morning, I awoke with Eleanor's story still fresh in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that her appearance at La Belle Époque was more than just a coincidence. I decided to confide in my mother, hoping she could shed some light on this mystery. At breakfast, I looked at my mother and glanced at her hand. The finger had exactly the same ring I saw at Eleanor's yesterday, so that's why the ring seemed familiar to me. "Mom, I began hesitantly over our morning coffee. You remember Grandma Eleanor, right? She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and longing. Of course I do, Oliver. Not a day goes by that I don't think about her. I think I might have seen her, I said, watching her face for any sign of recognition. An elderly woman came into the restaurant last night. She said her name was Eleanor. She had a ring just like you. My mother's eyes widened and her hand flew to her mouth. The ring, she whispered. Are you sure? I nodded. It looked exactly like it. She seemed so familiar. And her story. It sounded like she had been through so much. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We need to find her, Oliver. If it's really her, we need to bring her home. Later that evening, I returned to La Belle Époque, hoping against hope that Eleanor might come back. I couldn't concentrate on my work, my mind constantly drifting back to her. As the night wore on, I began to lose hope. But then, just as the last of the patrons were leaving, the door opened, and Eleanor stepped inside once more. Her eyes scanned the room until they found me, and a small, weary smile spread across her face. Eleanor, I said, rushing to her side. I'm so glad you came back. She looked at me with a mixture of relief and apprehension. I wasn't sure if I should, but I felt drawn here, like there was something unfinished. Please sit, I said, guiding her to a table. There's someone I want you to meet. I quickly called my mother, who arrived at the restaurant within minutes. As she entered, her eyes locked onto Eleanor's, and she froze. Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she rose unsteadily to her feet. Marion, she said, her voice breaking. Is it really you? My mother's face crumpled, and she took a hesitant step forward. Mom, it's me. It's really me. They stood there for a moment, staring at each other, before Marion rushed forward and embraced her mother. Eleanor's frail body seemed to melt into my mother's arms, and they held each other tightly, both of them sobbing openly. The years of pain, worry, and longing poured out in their tears, filling the room with a raw, palpable emotion that was impossible to ignore. Oh, Mom, Marion cried, stroking Eleanor's hair. We thought we'd lost you forever. We searched everywhere, but we couldn't find you. Eleanor clung to her daughter, her own tears soaking Marion's shoulder. I tried to come back. I tried so hard, but I was taken away, kept captive. It took me so long to escape. Marion pulled back slightly, cupping her mother's face in her hands. But you're here now, Mom. You're safe. We're going to take care of you. We'll never let you go again. Eleanor nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and lingering sorrow. I never gave up hope, Marion. Not for a single moment. I knew I had to find my way back to you. They embraced again, their sobs quieting into soft murmurs of reassurance and love. I stood by, my own eyes brimming with tears, feeling the profound significance of this moment. The other staff members and remaining patrons watched in respectful silence, many of them dabbing at their eyes. Mr. Parker, who had been one of the first to show Eleanor kindness, approached us. This is truly a miracle, he said softly. I'm so glad to see you reunited. Marion looked at him, her eyes shining with gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Parker. Your kindness meant so much to my mother. Eleanor nodded, smiling through her tears. Yes, thank you. You made me feel human again. As we made arrangements for Eleanor to come home with us, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. Despite everything she had been through, she had made it back to us. The restaurant, once a place of luxury and exclusivity, had become the setting for an unexpected and heartwarming reunion. In the days that followed, Eleanor reconnected with our family, sharing stories of her ordeal and the strength that had kept her going. Each day, she grew stronger, her spirit unbroken by the years of hardship. One afternoon, as we sat together in the living room, I asked her the question that had been on my mind since her return. Grandmother, how did you manage to survive all those years? She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. I held on to hope, Oliver. I held on to the belief that one day I would find my way back to you. That kept me going, even in the darkest of times. Her words resonated deeply with me, a reminder of the power of hope and the strength of family bonds. And as we continued to rebuild our lives together, I knew that we would face whatever challenges came our way, united by the love and resilience that had brought us back together. And so, the unexpected visitor who had walked into La Belle Epoque had transformed our lives, reminding us of the enduring power of love and the unbreakable bonds of family.